Hello and welcome to the Master's Voice, the podcast series from Mediabrief.com. I'm your host and friend Pavan Chawla, and I invite you to join me in welcoming my distinguished guest, Priya Chakravarty, Senior Director, HR at Essar Capital Limited. Priya, welcome to the Master's Voice on Mediabrief.com.
Thank you very much, Pavan. In fact, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, and I'm really looking forward to it.
As are we indeed, and it's a pleasure to have you on this episode of the Master's Voice on Mediabrief, Priya, and thank you for your time today, really. Thanks also to Lennon D'Souza of AdFactors PR for having made this interaction possible. So, Essar Capital is a company that we know is at the threshold of another big growth spurt, and Essar Capital's strength has always been its people. And my guest today is Priya Chakravarty, who as head of HR there obviously plays a crucial role. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But Priya, before we get into the business end of this conversation, allow me to introduce you to all our listeners. So by your leave, here goes. My guest on this episode of the Master's Voice podcast series on Mediabrief.com is Priya Chakravarty, Senior Director HR at Essar Capital, where she plays an integral role in strengthening the people practices across the organization. Priya is responsible for maintaining HR for international businesses and corporate functions and also handles learning and development. Priya brings in more than 20 years of experience in human resources, having worked across industries like manufacturing, pharma, IT, and retail. In her last assignment as Chief People Officer, Hometown and E-Zone, Priya was responsible for driving a transformational HR agenda that focused on organizational culture, building a talent pipeline, and initiating and aligning all people practices to business achievement. Priya has earlier worked with Cipla as Head HR International Business and volunteered with Akanksha Foundation. Priya has earlier also been part of the Essar Group, having worked at senior management roles, initially with Essar Oil and then as Head International HR for the corporate function. Priya is a postgraduate with a Master's in Organisational Dynamics from the University of Pennsylvania, and let me also tell you that Priya's mandate at Essar Capital Limited is truly complex and crucial and massive. So, championing and empowering the diverse talent required at Essar Capital Limited across multiple sectors and subsectors and levels is a truly complex, gargantuan mandate that Priya has been excelling at delivering. So let me now turn once again to Priya Chakravarty, Senior Director HR at Essar Capital, and welcome her to the Master's Voice on Mediabrief.com once again and begin our conversation. Priya, shall we?
Absolutely. I'm just looking forward to this, Pavan.
Great. Absolutely. So am I. So, Priya, when the lockdown first hit India, what were your immediate reactions and responses? How did HR at Essar Capital, under your leadership, rise to the challenge of keeping everyone reassured, protected, connected, and productive?
Pavan, I like your framework of reassured, protected, connected, and productive. However, I think what I would like to add to it, to this mix is agility, because that's one characteristic of the team that helps us most, was the attitude that we've been around, seen a lot. So instead of really waiting and watching, let's focus on taking the new circumstances in our stride. So we woke up to a new reality unfolding every day in front of us. No one had answers in terms of long-term and even mid-term perspective, but I think we exactly knew what we were doing and what we needed to accomplish over the next few days. So the inherent agility or comfort with change became the bedrock for engagement, productivity, reassurance, and protection for us.
Right.
We were quick to put together a team, from across different groups that were equipped to handle grievances of employees and support them in every possible way.
So you added agility to that mix of reassured, protected, connected, and productive. Really very nice. And like you said, very disarmingly, simply that nobody knew anything about the long or even the midterm, and you were actually just poised and focused on the next few days. Excellent. So what were the main areas you focused on?
So I think none of us had an understanding of the seriousness or the magnitude of the pandemic. And as we kind of understood the seriousness of it, one of the primary focus for us was clearly to ensure the safety of our employees across the operations. different locations, ensuring that the protocols that the government laid on was followed. We were ensuring that there are safety measures that we were taken in terms of keeping our employees, healthy. And also, I think it's not just about that, but really looking at having all of the technology solutions enabled to ensure that there is a continuity in terms of operations. So how do you use technology solutions to have people, be productive while they were operating from home? Because it was pretty much a shutdown for us in most of our locations, except all of the essential services. Apart from that, I think one of the key things was also to provide support to employees and their families in terms of providing doctors' advice, having counselors to meet them, having sessions in terms of keeping their health in check. So these were some of the first things that we had to do, apart from the fact that we had to keep our business operations going.
Right, Priya. Those really were the first and foremost priorities, to keep continuing, to keep working and to keep going. What was the single biggest learning or realization from the lockdown? On two fronts, okay? One, the work front for you, and then the personal front for you and or all the SRites, as you call your larger set of employees.
So on the work front, I think the learning clearly was that, all teams reflect the confidence that they see in their managers and in the leadership.
Right.
Also because leaders cannot see their teams sitting face to face and operating in front of them, there was immense amount of trust that was required, and that came to the forefront. At Essar, we enabled all our teams, motivated them, entrusted them to do the job, and gave them all the support that they needed actually to deliver. We see that the team has emerged much more stronger, more committed through these tough times. Having said that, I think, on the personal front, clearly it's about, walking the fine line between family and work, because the boundaries got blurred. The pandemic situation rocked the boat to all of our best laid out plans, and we had to create and reschedule those plans on the go. It wasn't that straightforward. I guess a lot of people around you, have lost friends and families, and has been in extremely distressing situations. Right. So we've all had to really rethink about our priorities and press the reboot button. So that has been a big learning for me personally.
Wonderful. I really liked what you said, about trust coming to the forefront when leaders don't see their people working, and the fact that, all teams will reflect the confidence that they see in their managers. So you actually had to sort of handhold and emotionally take along both sides of the spectrum, which completes the whole talent arc. The managers, the senior leaders, every team leader and their respective teams.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, I think all key stakeholders had to come together.
It truly was a devastating chapter in human history, never seen before in living human memory, right? And I hope my optimism to use the past tense with the pandemic is not misplaced. But tell me, Priya, how are you integrating alternative workforce segments now? And how has that changed your staffing model and workforce spends?
Clearly, I too hope that your optimism about the world finally seeing the back of the pandemic very soon is not misplaced at all. We're hopeful about that. And to answer your question, Pavan, at Essar, I think we've been really very quick to rationalize the new order of doing business and working with teams. We've introduced the hybrid working model quickly. Like I said, we supported in terms of providing them the tools to be able to be, productive. We've also kind of looked at roles that might require support in terms of having additional contract or freelance, people coming and getting on board to do the jobs which were probably not required to be having full-time employees in a certain way. We were also at the cusp, and I think for Essar specifically, we were at the cusp of this transition of a big change. So, I think that has also helped us to adapt and be mindful about our businesses and, our budgets, our costs. So this is not something that is new to us. I think the pandemic has just accelerated the process.
Right. And what about the process of hiring and onboarding? Surely it must have been, or it must have gone strongly digital and to whatever extent possible and practical, strongly non-contact.
Yeah, clearly, because I think what we didn't get an opportunity was for a new candidate to come to the office and experience the whole culture and the atmosphere. Because, I think every artifact, every employee says a story when you're sitting in the waiting lounge, right?
Right.
But we had to create that whole experience online. So we digitized the regular process of hiring and onboarding, but we were very mindful about the fact that how do you ensure that all new team members that joined Essar felt integrated and assimilated into the system as quickly as possible. Whether it's from mid-level to kind of senior levels, we re-examined our processes. We've looked at some of our key flagship programs like Business Leadership Program, the Executive Leadership Program. I think despite digitalizing several processes, we anticipated that some of the functions would take a little bit longer, in terms of working from a remote location.
Okay.
But I think the ownership really lies around the leadership to ensure that productivity doesn't suffer.
Right. To extend that thought, Priya, tell me more. What programs and initiatives have you undertaken to help employees be productive and engaged in a hybrid working model, the kind that you just described?
So one of the things is that, keeping the communication going on, right? You need to ensure that they're fully kind of cued into what's going on. They feel still connected to the vision of the organization, to still what we have in terms of our objectives. So that was one of the priorities in terms of, keeping them engaged. Two, like I said, our first priorities was clearly health. We used a lot of communication channels by using our internal doctors to communicate to the employees about safety, health measures that they need to take. Also counselors with regard to some of the employees who've not been able to cope up, with this pandemic, or families who've gone through, whether it is any kind of mental health, and having counselors, have those sessions, whether it's collectively as a group or individually, keeping the confidentiality intact. So these are some of the measures that we've taken. We've looked at our policies differently in terms of work from home, even basic policies like attendance, data collection, document management. A whole lot of new set of initiatives or tech solutions have been put in place to ensure that there is business continuity, but keeping in mind the health of employees as priority.
And you did undertake some specific initiatives, right, in line with this thinking and this whole effort. So could you cite a few examples of the initiatives you undertook?
Sure. So one was really the real-time communications. We set up a SR radio where we had leaders coming and talking to employees on an ongoing basis. It was a program that we had every day that was running during lunchtime, so that employees could listen in, and where leaders came and spoke about challenges and the encouragement that they gave to the employees. We had even doctors and counselors coming on those sessions to provide support and give feedback and information in terms of how they were doing and what steps that they need to take. So that was clearly a very, very powerful tool of communication that we used, considering that all of us were working in a very, not even a hybrid model at that point of time to begin with. I think it was clearly where all of us were working at home. That was one of the things. Our learning system in terms of learning TV was another big way of providing support to pick up a new skill, or upskilling or reskilling. That was one of the other things that we kind of clearly leveraged on. The thing I think we also found very important was to ensure that the managers or the mentors were equipped to deal with this change, to look at inclusivity in a big way. So providing support to the managers, to deal with their teams, to manage their teams effectively, efficiently, to become more inclusive. All of the tools in terms of technology, whether it was MS Teams, whether it was Zoom, whether it was Blue Jeans, how do you ensure that each person is connected and feels included and not left out? Having said that, the other big thing was really in terms of policies and measures was with regard to our medical insurance. How do you ensure that they are protected? And unfortunately, I think we also had situations where we did lose colleagues or people from their families. So looking at, support financially to these people were some of the key measures or key initiatives that we rolled out.
Oh, these were really wonderful, comprehensive initiatives, Priya, and truly reflective of, a caring company and group. Very, very good. I'm sure your employees would have truly appreciated all this. You spoke about keeping communications going amongst everybody, and you spoke about SR Radio. What other initiatives on the communication front, keeping everybody together and inspired, did you roll out?
Sure. So one of the very key initiative was the monthly newsletter.
Okay.
Where we share stories of our teammates, best practices, what we do in terms of our weekly engagements. And that was a powerful tool because, again, with regard to what people need to do in terms of their health, in terms of, keeping their families safe, in terms of what the protocols were, that was also very kind of a strong, powerful medium for us to communicate with our employees. Not only that, I think apart from that, to feel connected rather with the larger, families, we had initiated a program called Happiness Quotient, which we drove across. It was surely an online at that point when all of them were working offline at home. But when we came back and it was a hybrid model, we still continued to use that medium to be able to keep them all together, as one big team. Apart from that, the other thing was Aspire, which is our rewards and recognition program that we initiated in most of our businesses, especially at the plant sites.
Excellent. Really, very, very good initiatives, Priya. And I think they will also be a guiding light for a lot of entities and your peers and even the younger aspiring professionals in HR. Priya, you did mention your business leadership programs and executive leadership programs for mid and senior levels at SR. But do tell me more. How are you planning on reskilling your employees for new skills and capabilities? How are you managing employees who face role uncertainty given their existing skills and perhaps lacking the ability to adapt to or bring in the new skills necessitated by, the changed realities due to the pandemic?
Pavan, businesses, I think, have always seen a need to adapt and change, right? Whether it is a digital transformation or one that is focused on environment, social, or governance framework. The pandemic has only accelerated the change process, leaving no choice, for organizations but to adapt. I think for SR, there is a renewed focus on transitioning to more future-centric, which is market-valued businesses. So, for example, the plan is to move away from our thermal business and into renewables. So the teams from the power business have been going through on-the-job trainings, are being reskilled and upskilled as per the new requirements. So is the case with the shipping business, because the plan is to kind of come out of the shipping business. So we've identified people in that businesses to kind of move into other operations, whether it's the refinery business that we have in the UK, where they're looking at chartering or any such kind of functions. So I think particularly for us, the good thing is that, this has been an ongoing process.
Okay.
It's not that reskilling and upskilling is just about to be done during the pandemic. By virtue of being an organization that is spread over such large operations, we have the need to do this kind of reskilling and upskilling, as a continuous process.
Wonderful. Priya, you did mention about how you were transforming the workplace in terms of hybrid and virtual working models. And I think that was slightly sort of in the passing that you mentioned. I'd like a little more information on that, as well as how, you're going about with physical infrastructure and technology enablers too.
Right. So our entire focus over the last year and a half has been to keep an ear to the ground, gauge changes in the work scenario and take preemptive steps to ensure that we leverage SR's vast experience in handling changes of, such magnitude and to come out of this one. We've used various tech solutions to keep the workforce connected, whether it is for meetings, whether it is for document management, whether it is information security, communication to employees on an ongoing basis. This has been an effort that is continued to make sure that, everyone is productive and is able to work effectively. There are a lot of apps that we try to put into place, which is more on the go, where they can, the managers can kind of get their work done or assign any kind of activities. So that's another option. You don't have to be in office. You don't have to be on your laptop. So we've used some of those technological solutions. There's also been a consolidation of physical infrastructure. We've looked at our plant operations or whether people who are operating in cohorts, how do you kind of make sure that you co-locate them, considering that a lot of people are working from home. So we've looked at the physical infrastructure too. Efforts are also towards ensuring a more inclusive workplace. And I think I cannot reiterate the fact that how important this is. I guess from a sentiment, from a culture point of view, this is extremely, extremely critical for all of us. So how do you ensure that nobody feels left out? There are people who are working from home, there are people working from the office. When that kind of a situation is there, to equip managers to think and be sensitive to the fact that you always should realize that when you're having meetings, it's always going to be a Zoom meeting or an online meeting, because you don't want to feel people who are working from home left out. They need to be part of the decision-making process. So that is, also one of the things I think is very, very important and critical for the business.
That's really good work.
And I think we've been through both crests and troughs at various levels, at the organization, at the industry, whether it is local, domestic, international. The experience has just taught us to remain agile, maintain confidence in ourselves, a sentiment and attitude I think that has actually been imbibed by all SRites throughout the organization.
Wonderful. So as a result of all this, SRites have been taught, or been made conscious of the fact that it's important to remain agile and to maintain confidence in themselves. Really good work, Priya, by your entire HR team and the leaders and executives it would have coordinated with and therefore helped immeasurably. Let's switch gears to your personal priorities as an HR head at Essar. What are the 2 or 3 values or attributes that you always look for in candidates while interviewing them, Priya?
This is a very important question, Pavan, and I think what I can tell you is that it has evolved with time. In fact, the pandemic situation has also made us look at talent afresh. I believe some evergreen attributes are: how do people take ownership? How curious are they to learn? How do they take the accountability? While some evolving ones are, responsiveness in times of adversity, inclusiveness and digital orientation. Responsiveness in times of adversity has become extremely critical. I guess we've always looked at this in leaders earlier too, but it has never been put to test as much as it's been during the pandemic. That's one of the key areas that we keep looking at. Cultural fit continues to dominate our selection process. We are, and as an organization, operate in a certain way that enables people to succeed. So cultural fit becomes extremely important for us when you are evaluating candidates.
Amazing. Priya, you have been such a wonderful and such a powerful and such an important, crucial, critical asset and driver for continuity and for growth and positivity during the darkest times in living human memory, the pandemic, for every SRite who's worked with you. So great job. Priya, on the work front, my last question to you in this episode is: how important do you consider the presence of happiness in your employees to be for the workplace and for themselves? How do you measure and help grow happiness through each employee at the workplace?
So happiness has several offshoots in satisfaction, self-worth, meaningful connections, and success. And that, I guess, is important. And a happy employee is one who is productive.
Right.
To that end, we've introduced several interventions and programs at Essar, particularly in the last 2 years, that work towards enabling happiness. Mm-hmm. Happiness Quotient is our program, where we get people to come together, do activities as teams, and we're very serious about creating a happy and healthy environment at Essar. Mm-hmm. It's not just about these kind of activities, but beyond it, in terms of how do you create that personal connect across board that helps you to break boundaries irrespective of which location and which geography you're working from.
Right.
So importantly, I believe that this is a factor which is independent of the pandemic scenario, and that is a priority too for us, irrespective of the pandemic.
Excellent. Really great thoughts, Priya. A happy employee obviously is a productive one. And as you said, happiness has several offshoots in satisfaction, self-worth, meaningful connections, and success. Really well said. Now, let me ask you to name a movie that you would recommend your employees to watch, and why, Priya?
Okay, so instead of a movie, I would like to kind of choose a book titled When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. It's a journey of an ordinary person living an extraordinary life, or has lived an extraordinary life. And I think there is so much to take away from that story and incorporate into our daily lives. For me, it is one of those books that has really moved me and I carry with me every day. It's just a reminder of, enjoying every ordinary day that makes it beautiful and extraordinary.
Wow, Priya, thank you very much for sharing all the excellent initiatives and insights that will help everyone who's a custodian of HR or works in an HR team or is a leader and custodian of individual teams, verticals, or businesses, of course. I enjoyed my conversation with you on the Master's Voice on Mediabrief.com, Priya. Any thoughts on our chat today?
Pavan, I definitely enjoyed the conversation that I had with you. It's been a pleasure to be on the Master's Voice, the podcast series from Mediabrief.com. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on this platform and share some of the thoughts. It's been an exciting conversation. And once again, thank you very much.
You are most welcome, Priya. Thank you for your gracious words. And thanks also once again to Lenin D'Souza of AdFactors PR for making this interaction possible. Priya Chakravarty, Senior Director, Human Resources at Essar Capital Limited, was my distinguished guest on this episode of the Master's Voice podcast series on Mediabrief.com. I hope you found this conversation as informative and engaging as I did, and I feel confident that younger professionals and Priya's peers alike would have received multiple actionable insights into keeping an entire complex workforce reassured, protected, connected, productive, and therefore motivated. Till we meet again in the next episode of the Master's Voice podcast series on Mediabrief.com, this is your host and friend Pavan Chawla saying, take care, stay safe, bye-bye.